I had this God in my head that's sort of a patchwork quilt of crazy people and evil people in my life. He's not like that. And we begin to make a distinction in our head. In psychology, we say there's a God image and there's a people image, and sometimes they're together and we need to separate them. These kooky evil people over here are not him. We have a separate God image from a people image. And then what I found is that as you find out God can hear this, and as you see who the real God is, you begin to want to move toward him. A God that is so powerful that he can change the universe, and yet so safe he can hear me say, I'm bugged with you, he's a God that I want to follow. In the book, I talk about, but why would he allow abuse? Why would he allow me to be with that mom or dad or cousin or evil person? Why would he allow this to happen? And I give lots of reasons, but it's never just one reason. Sometimes we don't know. And I think we need to be honest that on this side of the grave, on this side of the veil, we may not know why it happened. And I hate when people say, well, it happened for a good purpose, you'll see the good purpose. I think that's just crazy. Because if you read Ecclesiastes, we just go, sometimes we don't know. And I think I don't know is okay. Sometimes we do see a purpose. Like Joseph said, I was allowed to be in prison and dumped in a hole because I could save a nation of Israel from famine. Sometimes we do get the reason. But I think the most powerful truth, when I'm mad at God and I think he's let me down and it's led me down this path to being broken sexually, the most powerful truth is that God suffers with me and that he was with me in the abuse and he was with me in the trauma and he was with me when I had no choices, when I was helpless, when I was under control by someone else. He was crying with me and suffering with me because we see that in Jesus. And if you go to the book of Hebrews, it says he's felt everything we felt except without sin. And I think we understand that we have a suffering God who not only loves us, but has felt it and was with us. There's a sense of comfort and a sense of identification and a sense of you get it and you're safe that moves us past the anger and past the mistrust and past the pushing away, moves us back toward a God who feels that. It's important to kind of drill down on the whole idea of if I'm sexually broken and I've experienced hell basically on earth, and how do I be mad at God and that be okay? Understand that there's a term called containing, and it comes from the pediatric literature and research about mother-child interactions or mother-infant interactions. And it really helps us understand God because they found out one of the best things that a mother can do to maybe a 3-month-old or a 6-month-old, a little bitty kid, is when they're really, really mad because they're wet or because you didn't pick them up or because they're colicky or whatever babies are mad at, that the mother just picks up that child and she just kind of lets the child be mad. And she just soothes them and she says, I know you're really upset, but it's okay. You really hate me right now, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm here. I'm here. And literally what she's doing is she's taking the rage of the infant and putting the infant's rage into her breast. She's accepting it. She's containing it. She's saying, you can be mad at me and it won't kill me. You can be mad at me and I won't say, gosh, I bore you for 9 months. Don't you appreciate me? No guilt messages from this mom. She just says, I'm an adult. I'm strong. I can take your rage and I will hold you even when you're mad. And what happens is, and there's all these great studies about this, is the infant starts to calm down. And the respiration rate gets regular and the blood pressure stops spiking and they stop moving around and they just kind of like rest and go to sleep and feel comforted because the mother was strong enough as the grown-up, because there's got to be a grown-up in the room. She's a grown-up and she says, I can take your anger. I'm your mom. I know you're a kid. And the child feels like, if I'm that mad, you're going to die or you're going to kill me. And they live in this kind of paranoid world. I can't be mad because I can't destroy the world. Their feelings are so strong. They don't understand feelings because they're babies. And mother says, that's just a feeling. I can take it. Well, think about what God does. And I've had this experience personally as well as with my clients, is that he's so big and so strong. When I'm shaking my fist like Job did and saying, I don't get it. Jesus on the cross, why have you done this to me? Are you going to let this cup pass, he says in the Passion. And God says, I'm here. I can take this. I can take this rage. You're just a kid and you don't understand. And I'm the grown-up here. And once our rage is dissipated, then we feel calm and he's safe. And I had my day in court and I was mad and you were still with me. And this flow of love, I had a friend tell me recently that a flow of love came into them. That's not a God who says, you're not grateful. That's a God who says, my love is so much greater than your anger. And that calms us down. And also that's an important step in our healing. Because when a sexually broken person realizes, I can be mad and still be loved, I can be angry and still be connected, I can be enraged and still experience grace, all of a sudden their righteousness and peace come together again. And they go, gosh, I can be an honest, angry person and you won't leave me, say bad things about me, condemn me? Yeah. And we call that maturity. So it's an important step in getting well.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone. Your passion.
A lot of people who kind of get it, they come out of denial and they realize, I'm struggling. In fact, if you're watching the show right now, you may be doing it to help somebody else, and that's great, or you may be suspecting that you've got an issue, and we're really glad you're here, because we want this to be a place of safety and grace for you too, because we believe in you, and we believe in God, and we believe a process works. So people that coming out of it's not that bad, or I can willpower out of this, if you're ready to say, I hate it, it's bad, it's hurting me, it's hurting my God, it's hurting my relationships, it's hurting my life, it's hurting my career, welcome. But then the question comes, once I realize this, well, I've got brokenness inside. I'm realizing that not only do I have out-of-control sexual behavior, but the insides feel empty. Or worse than empty, I feel bad, like I'm just a condemned, bad, horrible person. Where do I start? Well, on a psychological and a spiritual level, you always have to first start in the first place. Before you can change, you must be loved. Nothing can happen. There's things called attachment disorders in psychology. There's things called trust disorders. There's problems in connection. It'd be like saying, we're going to help you to transform your life, but we're going to build this house of your life, but we're not going to put a bottom on it. There's no foundation. There's going to be no footprint. We're just going to start building wood and then put a roof on it. It's going to fall apart. The foundation, the way God has constructed the universe, is love. You've got to learn how to experience and accept love. So in 1 John it says that God is love in chapter 4. So at his essence, at his core, God's love. So before you begin to understand, here's how I can say no, and here's how I can change my habits, and all those things are important, you've got to be in the foundation of love. And a book I wrote called Loving People addresses that, because kind of all of us would like to be a loving person. We'd like to love our spouse if we're married, or love our date if we're not married, or love our family or our friends, and to be a caring person. I mean, who's not going to sign up for that? But the problem is, you can't give it if you don't have it. How can I give love when I've never experienced it? And I really hate it when people say, well, if you want to get love, you got to go give it. I'm thinking, well, how do you drive your car? You drive your car and you say, well, you're out of gas, car. Well, go feel like you've got gas right now. Well, my car, I know what it would do. It'd pull over the side and say, I'm out, bye. Because you can't give what you don't have. In fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, it says, what do you have? What do you possess that you've not already received? It's always get it first and then give it. So there's a section of the book where I talk about, and this is kind of the risky part, is you've got to start asking the right people for it. And people with sexual brokenness, and I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, asking is really like they're allergic to it. You're asking me to ask when, that never worked before. And I have 4 or 5 things that I tell people to do. And basically, it's you've got to learn how to identify what your needs are, your relational needs, and be in a safe environment, and then ask people. And the basic relational needs are things like empathy. I need, and I train people. I tell them, you've got to say these words and look in somebody's eyes. Well, I hate this. Well, yeah, we all hate it, but do it. You've got to look at somebody's eyes and say, I need to know that what I'm getting ready to tell you, that you have empathy for. Or our needs for understanding. I need to know that you understand me, that you get me. You see how I'm wired when I tell you. Or validation. I need to know that you feel like my feelings are real and I'm not making this up, and that my feelings have value. Or a need for affirmation. I need to know you're on my team no matter what I tell you, and you're on my side no matter how many times I've messed up and I've broken. And I train people. Sometimes they have to go 3x5 card because they're so scared and their hands are just shaking. They go, I need to know that you have empathy for me. Oh no, I feel so bad. And I say, stick with it, stick with it. And the miracle happens when the other person goes, yeah, like in a small group setting or a mentor setting or a pastor or whatever, a counselor. And the person goes, yeah, I get it. And I understand how bad things are. And that's how we begin to feel loved. And when we feel loved because it comes from the outside, then we start to think, there's hope for me. If I have that foundation, that footprint of love, I can probably tolerate the rest of the process of facing pain, looking at my past, forgiving things, grieving things, healing, but I can't do any of that until I'm loved. A lot of people say, okay, I'm sold, I'm into the love thing, what's it look like? And there's a lot of crazy thinking out in our culture about that. You see it on billboards, you see it on Cosmo, on the checkout stand when it says 9 ways to love, and the next month it says 9 new ways, and the next month 9 new ways, so they're now 27. There's a lot of really strange teaching about love. But I go back to the Bible, and I believe that the best definition of love is one that's in the book. It says it's seeking and doing what's best for another person. Seeking and doing what's best for another person. So sometimes love is knowing somebody so well that I know what they need, that maybe I need to confront them sometimes and say, you're hanging around the wrong computer sites, I love you. Or you're hanging around the wrong people here and you're too vulnerable right now. Or you're not being honest about how you're doing. Or you're withdrawing. And I don't want you to withdraw. So sometimes love is a little bit tough because that's the best for somebody. That's the medicine. Sometimes love is just a plain old connection. When I am with somebody in my head and my heart and I'm totally connected to that person. What I have found is that the person who is sexually broken really needs that second type first. They need to know that when I'm with someone, that any part of me that comes out, a mad part, a sexually distorted part, a fantasy, a giving up part, a selfish part, any part that comes out, there's going to be a home for it in that other person. That's how they know they're loved. Is I can just show you the brokenness of the broken, and you'll say, I get it, and I'm with you. In Romans 15, Paul tells us, accept one another as God in Christ has accepted you. And I love that because in the Greek, the word accept means to take into your chest. I will take into my chest every part of you. Not that I'll agree with every part, not I'll say every part's great, it's not. We've all got darkness, but I can hang with it, and I can connect to you. And people begin to feel loved when they feel like, you know the bad stuff, and you haven't walked out the door, you're not throwing up, you're like with me, you're even talking about yourself. That's when we know we're loved. You can't feel loved if you don't move into confession, because then you're just bringing out the strong parts and the healthy parts and the together parts. Well, I know people that do that all day, and they feel deeply unconnected. They feel deeply unloved because nobody knows the other stuff. But when my needs come out, and I always help people, it's either your needs or your darkness. If your needs come out like loneliness, lack of connection, isolation, detachment, or bad things come out like my selfishness and my resistances and my, it's all about me and kind of like, protesting God. If my needs and my badness and my darkness come out and you are with me, I will feel, sometimes people say for the first time in 30 or 40 years, now I know what love feels like because you took it all. You don't agree with it all, but you took it all and you haven't left me. You've moved towards me. That's the experience you're looking for because that begins the process.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone. Your passion.
God talks a lot about love. Jesus answered someone's question when they said, so how do I love this God? And he said, well, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the way that breaks down is when a person who's struggling with sexual issues first enters the world of love, it's a new world for them. They're ready for betrayal, or they're ready to be objectified, or they're ready for somebody who is going to use them in some way. It's a new world, and they're very unfamiliar with it. So what I tell them is, you've got to get into a sea of health. You've got to get around a healthy church where you can be broken, but they still love you. And they preach the Bible, and they're solid about the Bible. There's not an ounce of condemnation, but they really are into God's Word. But they're also really into the Holy Spirit and how much He does for us. And they're also really into the Bible. Into the small groups. And they're really into really getting to know each other and really opening up to each other and not playing the game. And also, you probably need a person in your life who has expertise and hours with sexual issues, because that's a complicated issue. You can't just take somebody who's never dealt with that. So you've got this sea of health around you. And so you've got all these antibiotics. Sometimes you might need antidepressants, which can really help, and anti-anxiety, which can really help. And so you've got the medical part, and you've got the spiritual part, and the social part, and you've got the recovery piece over here, and there's a 12-step here with a bunch of really cool SA people. And you've got, the deeper character issue part, and you've got the mentoring. This sea of health where you just jump in and go, I'm going to quit everything I can quit until I get transformed. That's heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's saying, I want God to love me and heal me in all the ways there are. And when that happens, I begin to feel whole. I feel like my life's going in one direction, and I feel loved. And when I begin to feel loved, I begin to move on. And the drives start to go away, because the sexual drives, generally speaking, have to do with some unloved part of me that I'm trying to access in a sexual way. That's why in psychology we say people sexualize. It's not a sexual issue. It's a sexualized issue. In other words, I took a lonely part and put sex on top. I took a powerless part that felt helpless and put sex on top. I put a shamed, guilty, self-attacked, condemned part that I hate about myself and sexualized it, put sex on top. So once you're in this sea of health, you go into all these parts of yourself and they start coming up, and you go, I don't need this anymore, because I'm around all these healthy antibiotics, medically, spiritually, emotionally. I don't have the drives anymore. One of the saddest things I see, and this is just as a psychologist, is when somebody goes, well, I'll always be this way. Life for me is holding on, coping, managing desires, and always feeling kind of like I've got to keep myself under wraps. And that's so sad, because it's not true biblically and it's not true psychologically. This is not about coping, and this is not about trying harder. It's about transformation from the inside. So I become a person who is free, and I can have sexual desires and they don't overwhelm me, and I can have appropriate love and appropriate happy times and appropriate sad times, and I don't have to worry every second that I'm going to fall off the cliff into sin, because I'm living the life. So the more we surround ourselves with these things, the more we see the desires become to what we call normal level desires. That's the goal, is to go to the way God designed, not to be wrapped so tight that you can't have any feelings at all. You know, if you've been watching this program for any amount of time, you've probably heard a million people talk about groups. And if you've been in the church for any amount of time, you know, we're into small groups now. And small groups are the thing. And, you know, what is that about? And I do a lot of training in small groups because I really believe in them. And I'm in them, and I train people to lead them. But there is kind of the idea of a small group I wouldn't want to go to it. And that's oh yeah, a small group. Oh yeah, brownies and coffee, and then we'll study Leviticus, and then we'll pray for Aunt Sally's, arthritis. And that's the typical kind of come in and have the brownies and coffee, and then you study the passage for 45 minutes, and then your last 3 minutes you pray. And, I really believe we need lots of Bible study, but there's other places you can do that. In a small group setting, sometimes the amount of Bible is kind of shortened because you can get it other places, because what you can't get in other places is the process. And the process is where the power comes. Based on the Word and based on people's prayer, the people finally sit down and go into what some of the old philosophers called I, thou. And I, thou means I'm going to tell you who I am, you're going to tell me who you are. And what that really means is now the transformation begins, because we're going to be known. And when you know somebody, things start to happen. What generally happens in a small group, and this is kind of explained to people, is that the function of it is to become the second family of God. In Psalm 68, it says that God is provides a home for the homeless and provides a father to the fatherless. Home for the lonely, father to the fatherless. And what that refers to is that we all came from a family, from either a little bit dysfunctional to moderately dysfunctional to psychotic dysfunctional. I mean, there's different levels of dysfunction. Adam and Eve are dysfunctional, right? And so all of us came from a family where there wasn't 100% perfect love, wasn't 100% perfect grace, the structure wasn't there all the time, and maybe mom or dad were at odds, all the way to abuse and divorce and alcoholism and sex addiction and drugs and chaos and horrible stuff. Well, nobody came from a perfect environment. So God allowed us to have a thing called the church. And the church is God's second transforming, healing, reparative family that's supposed to do two things. It heals the wounds that the first family caused: detachment, trust issues, lack of definition, boundary issues, fear of conflict, dependency, being afraid to make your way, shame, guilt. It undoes the things the first family did, but it also provides the things the first family didn't provide: love, constancy, healthy structure, freedom, guidance, shepherding, training, discipling. So in that second context of that small group, you get the goodies and the nutrients that you didn't get the first time around. Because I believe that, biblically speaking, the first family isn't as important as the second family. And I'm a real family person. I mean, I love family. But Jesus said to somebody when they came up to him and said, your mother and brothers are out here wanting to speak to you. He said, who are they? Who are my mother and brothers and sisters but those who follow the will of God? What he was saying was second family trumps first family. Second family is the eternal family, the one that shepherds us and gets us ready to grow and be a cool person and find out our passion and find our job and find our ministry and find our calling and find our gifts and heal. So when we say, well, what do I do with a small group? What's it about? The small group's supposed to fill in all the cracks for you that you didn't get the first time around. And that's why I go back to the I, thou, and the knowing. The more you open up and you're vulnerable in your small group and you stop playing the game and you say, life's not always perfect for me. I struggle in some areas. And if it's the right small group, because sometimes people with sexual brokenness shouldn't be in a small group that has no experience, because sometimes, I hate it, but I think in our Christian culture sometimes there's this kind of a pejorative, like sexual issues are worse than other issues. Well, I'm sorry, give me a person with sexual brokenness over a prideful Pharisee any day. I'd rather hang with that person than that person. And I think the scriptures teach the same thing about Jesus' attitude, but it's just not the case sometimes. So get with people who understand that you're you and you've got sexual issues, and find maybe a place where there's healthy openness and healthy grace, or people who have experience, or people who just don't have any condemnation, and open up. And when you open up, what happens is all that stuff you didn't get the first time around starts to come in. That's what transformation is, I believe. It's returning us to the original state that God intended us to be at, in the garden, and giving us the things we didn't get the first time around. I found two kind of wrong or not healthy or not helpful ways that people look at this. And it's two extremes, really. One of those is kind of the classic 12-step, and I love 12-step, and I refer people to 12-step all the time. But there are some things I don't agree with, where they basically say you're always going to be a sex addict, or you're always going to be an alcoholic, or you're always going to be a food addict or a whatever. That's one problem, because I think what that does is then it limits the power of God to transform us. I believe a sex addict can become a former sex addict. And the Bible teaches that I'm a new creature in Christ. The old ways are past, new things have come. I just wouldn't be interested in a coping model. It just seems so hopeless. I'm into transformation where a person says, gosh, I woke up with normal sexual desires. So that's the weakness, I think, of the 12-step model. Then there's a second model, which is kind of the theological position model. Like, you see your position in Christ, and so since God looks at me, he's not mad anymore because he sees me through Christ, so claim your position. So stop feeling that way. Stop calling yourself a sex addict, because you're not. The Bible always teaches two realities. There's our standing in Christ, but then there's experience here. There's a process of being real about who I am and who I'm not, and we're going toward the goal here. But I think that especially theologians need to understand that that's just not full biblical teaching, is to deny the process of where I am right now. So I tell people, you just say, I'm a sex addict right now, or I'm a sexually broken person now, but I am jumping into the process, and I'm going to 3 or 4 meetings a week, and I'm seeing a counselor, and I'm reading books, and I'm opening up, and I'm spilling my guts. And my hope is that one day I won't be one, because God honors that process.